hard to follow such great speakers. I actually don't have a theme to talk about, a project to present, or a place to sort of advocate for. My task this afternoon is to try to give a theme that connects all the talks together. Not very easy. Margaret and I have just returned from 8 weeks overseas. That's what you do when you retire. And to return home is to return to the Canberra airport. And these days, having luggage is very 20th century, I know, but we have luggage and younger people don't. But if you do have luggage, you go to the thingamajig which brings it out. And while you're waiting for that to happen, your eye is caught by an advertisement above the luggage. And the advertisement, if you have enough money, sells you a submarine or an aeroplane or anything to defend Fortress Australia. So why do they do that? Why, when you enter Canberra, do you have this advertisement when you pick up your luggage? I actually don't have enough money for those things. Presumably it's a subliminal message, and here you are in the national capital, and our business is to defend you. Australia will be stronger if it has a good defence, and if we know who the enemies are, we can keep them at bay. You're going to be okay, guys. The rest of the world can stay out there, but we'll keep you safe. To those of you who will live your life in the 21st century, which isn't me, it's most of you, will actually that be the case? Will you be safer, more prosperous, more at home if you can defend yourselves against the foe? Or are you more likely to be more prosperous, more secure, more happy if you engage with the foe even? I actually believe that we live in a very interesting point in intellectual history, when there is, I think, despite what they say in the media, a convergence between philosophy, religion and science over one particular matter. And it is that everything is connected. Nothing lives in isolation, everything belongs, everything relates to everything else. Science has been saying that now for some time, and maybe it had to do with the Big Bang, that everything originated from one particular point in history. But biologists, physicists, more or less all scientists talk about the relationship that exists between all living things and indeed all matter. Religion has been saying that for some time, probably not very well, but the Christian faith is primarily about that matter. And at the focus of the Christian faith is the person of Jesus Christ, who said, there is neither bond nor free, Greek nor Gentile, male nor female. There is, in the kingdom of God, everything belongs. And I want to put it to you this afternoon that that which should drive the biggest ideas in the world have to do with common good. And that there is a battle being fought at the moment between common good and self-interest. And unfortunately, self-interest at the moment is prevailing. And that if the 21st century, if we are to survive the 21st century as a human species, common good must prevail. About 18 months ago, I was at a talking gig in the National Library. Philip Adams was the main sort of convener of this gig. And there were a large number of scientists, philosophers, and one person representing religion, namely me. The topic was, does humanity have a future? And the scientists and philosophers generally were very pessimistic about that question. They came to the view that no, we probably didn't have a future, because at the end of the day we were so kind of wired to self-interest that we would rather go to destruction rather than cooperate together. At the heart of the idea of the common good is really a very simple philosophical thought, and that is of a single house. There is only one house. We might call it the planet Earth, but we could say bigger than that is the whole biosphere in which all living things find their existence, or it is the whole universe. But the Greek word for a single house is oikos. And from oikos, a number of other words come, like the word ecology or the word economy. They are related to the Greek word oikos. Economy basically means the rules of the house. So the economy is the way that the people who live in the house decide the rules should operate. And at the moment, the dominant idea about the way the rules operate is that profit needs to prevail. No matter what effect that profit making has on harmony and goodwill and equity, the dominant idea about the rules of the house at the moment in the world is that profit needs to prevail, and if profit prevails, then things good will flow from that. The word ecology is actually related, the latter part of ecology is logos, which is wisdom or word. And so ecology is the wisdom of the house. That is to say, how things relate, how they belong together, how they harmonise, whether this over there relates to that over there, and how it does, and how they're connected. That's what ecology is about. But we live in a world in which one of those two words prevails absolutely over the other, and you know which one that is. It is that economy always prevails over ecology. The rules of the house prevail over the wisdom of the house, which is quite ridiculous because presumably the rules should serve the wisdom, but in actual fact they don't. It's actually the rules are set, profit making, and the idea of wisdom, how things relate, actually doesn't come into the matter. So today you've heard some great talks, some very moving talks about all sorts of aspects of life, and they've been about wisdom. You couldn't deny that they have been about wisdom, about how food is harvested, wasted, collected, used. That picture of the train going to New Zealand and back again, loaded with trucks with food that is wasted, is almost an unbelievable image to get into your head. Whereas the wisdom that has been taught us here, something very profound. And what about the pain of the Holocaust? Or the Nakba? And the impact that it has? And are we safer if we actually then defend ourselves against everybody else? Or would it be better for us to engage? Is actually the future of a Palestinian the same as the future of an Israeli? Is one more secure and more free when the other is free? Or is one freer by entrapping and subjugating the other? Desmond Tutu said that no South African will be free until all Palestinians are free. Why did he say that? No much connection between the two. Presumably because he sees there is only a single house, and anywhere in the world, while one person is enslaved, you are enslaved, and so am I. While one person remains unfree or without freedom, then all of us in some way are enslaved. So the idea of the common good is an idea which simply doesn't. It begins really in philosophy with people like Cicero, Plato and Aristotle, a long way back. And although, in my view, it's related to religion, it actually isn't dependent upon religion. As far as Aristotle was concerned, common good was about virtue, and good was that which was virtuous. And so if you live a life in which the ideals that have been exemplified in the talks today, if they prevail, then common good prevails. Those talks were obviously about a virtue. Instead of receiving flowers that die, give money for a life that lives. That is a virtue. And so Aristotle's view was that if virtue prevails, common good prevails. If virtue fails, then common good fails. And we live in a world in which virtue isn't necessarily rewarded or proclaimed or put on a pedestal. Other things are put on a pedestal, like profit and so on, self-interest. In the history of Christianity, for many, many centuries, Christianity depended upon the teaching of Aristotle. It was picked up by the philosopher, religious leader Thomas Aquinas, who actually took Aristotle's ideas and said that the predominant virtue using the Greek word, is caritas. Our word for that is love. That is the predominant virtue. And in the talks that you had today, that, if you think about it, was the predominant virtue. To have the capacity to let somebody else have what you have, to desire the good of the other person, not simply because it's a nice thing to do, but because in looking for the good of the other, there is blessing for oneself. That's actually how the world operates, how the common good prevails. Later this year in Paris, the world will meet to discuss the whole issue of climate change. Every time we've met so far, each country, and particularly Australia, has gone to such conferences with only one question in their mind, the Australian delegates. The question is, what will happen at this conference from which Australia can gain an advantage over the rest of the world? Now I put it to you, is it possible for Australia to have an advantage in this context which is different to the advantage that belongs to the whole world? No, it is not possible, because there is only one single world, and we either solve this problem together or we fail together. It simply is not possible for a nation, a single nation, to gain an advantage in this arena, which is different to the advantage that belongs to us all. And so there is a massive challenge culturally, ideologically, for the representatives of Australia and other nations in Paris. In my church, the Anglican Church, people like myself meet with colleagues every 10 years in what's called the Lambeth Conference. And in 1920, following what was then called the Great War, the Lambeth Conference met following that war, and the decimation of humanity as a result of it. You need to go to Europe as well as to hear the stories in Australia to understand the extraordinary length, depth and depravity of that war. A whole generation of British were killed. At the end of when the Lambeth Conference met, they met around the idea of the common good. And they said the greatest enemy to common good wasn't simply self-interest, but was national self-interest. And that what happened with the First World War, the Great War, was the hubris and the kind of the idea that certain people, leaders of Austria and Hungary and Britain and Germany and Russia, could actually somehow prevail, and their own pride was at stake. So here I suggest to you, young people of Radford School, Radford College, you're growing up into a world in which it is no longer possible to ignore the idea of the common good. History shows that inequity eventually corrects itself. And at the moment we have inequity that is growing so exponentially that now 1% of the world's population own 90% of the world's wealth. 1% of the world's population owns 90% of the world's wealth. The 90% of the population, or the 99% of the population, will not put up with that indefinitely. And already at Calais, trying to push their way through the tunnel into Britain, are thousands of people. Coming across the Mediterranean Sea from Eritrea, Sudan, Sierra Leone, Libya, are thousands of people who do not think it is fair for them to live that way when we live this way. And so if we do not invest in the well-being of people who live in poor countries, how can we expect them not to want to live in our own? And for Australia now to invest in defence in submarines rather than investing in foreign aid is not only immoral, it is stupid, because we actually are exacerbating a problem of injustice which will explode amongst us. Young men and women, older men and women, I've lived my life in the 21st century, in the 20th century. Yours in the 21st century is a huge challenge. We can prevail. We are brothers and sisters together. We are one family. We live in one house. May the wisdom of that house prevail. Thank you very much.